Hello and welcome to New England Authors. One of the wonderful things about doing this show is exploring new subjects for me, and I hope it is for you as well. Our guest today is Tony Raosto. Tony has written about India and about the Mughal Empire, so we get a really good chance to talk about the Mughal Empire. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. So you have a personal interest in India, right?
Well, I've been there a lot and fell in love with it.
Yeah.
So that's my interest.
When did you start going there?
In the late 60s, about 68.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've had the opportunity to see it grow from a more or less a British possession to
Yes.
to be its own country, and it's kind of exhilarating actually to see that. Yeah.
I'll tell you, Tony, I've bicycled through India.
Oh, have you? Oh,
Yeah, I
tell me.
bicycled on
Oh no! I always wanted to do that.
Yeah,
oh, good
yeah.
for you.
And then that was in the 1980s, and then I went back in a couple of years ago for a wedding, and I noticed the great changes. It's a big country now. It's a huge
such a great
country.
So you bicycled from where to where?
Well, a couple of trips. The first trip was what it was called Bombay at that time, down to the south and up to
Kerala.
no, I didn't go to Kerala, but I went there another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then over to what's used to be called Madras. You know, things have changed. Another time I went to Delhi, and I went through up to Nepal and down to Calcutta and beyond that. Anyway, very fascinating country. But you got interested in the Mughal Empire.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Tell us, who were they?
Well, the Mughals were an invading party from Central Asia, and they made war on the Lodi dynasty in I think it was 1526 when Babur won. And in a battle that lasted about 5 hours, he won the whole of India.
Wow!
An amazing feat, actually.
Yeah. Were they from Persia or is it?
No, they were from Central Asia, but their influence, their artistic and influence was Persian. In fact, Persian became the language of the court, of the Mughal court.
So it started around 1600 or so, 16 something.
Well, our story starts around that time.
Yeah, right.
And the beginning of Jahangir's reign, which was in 1605. So it goes on.
Yes. So your story is about Jahangir.
It's about Jahangir and his wife.
And his wife.
His wife, Nur Jahan, who is an extraordinary person.
Yeah.
She was a huntress. She once killed 4 lions with 6 shots. Rather tigers, not lions, with 6 shots. She wrote poetry. She rode elephants. She led an army. She built a magnificent tomb for her father. She established gardens all over India.
Yeah, and the tomb became the precursor of the Taj Mahal.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. A lot of the techniques, etc.
Now, he was the son of the great Akbar, the great conqueror,
he
right?
He was indeed, yeah.
But and he had a very active sex life, right? He married how many wives?
Well, his harem, Akbar's harem, was there were 5,000 women in his harem.
Wow.
A good deal of them were relatives, mothers, cousins, aunts, all that kind of thing. So they lived also in the harem.
The harem is just the women's quarters, right?
A city of women, really. Yeah. Everything a city has was in the harem, except for men. There were eunuchs, of course, but they were the only men, plus the emperor. The emperor was the only virile man in the harem.
So, what got you interested in Nur Jahan? I mean, she's fascinating. How did you find out about her? And then
I was in Brookline Booksmith, and there was a remaindered book that said the 6 great Mughal emperors, and I thought, well, that's pretty good. And in reading this book, I discovered Nur Jahan, who is one of the most extraordinary women who've ever lived.
yeah.
So I was kind of taken with her story and did a lot of research and sort of brought her to life in this book.
Now, she wasn't the first wife of
Jahangir.
Jahangir, no.
No, she was either the 18th or the 20th wife. I haven't been able to really determine which. But he had many others that he had concubines and all kinds of women that weren't wives, you know.
So was it a decadence?
I guess it was. I guess it was really decadent because Jahangir was addicted to opium and wine simultaneously. So the court took a cue from him. So I would imagine it was fairly decadent.
Yeah. So then the Mughals lasted until the British, right? Until the British finally kind of defeated them, or?
Yeah, well, they sort of faded away. But there was the final great Mughal emperor was a guy called Aurangzeb. And in contrast to Akbar, who basically founded the empire, he, through a kind of multiculturalism, Aurangzeb was he was a very devoted Muslim, and so what happened is he cut his ties with the Hindu majority, and that brought disaster, and the British filled the vacuum.
Oh, I see. So yeah, that's one thing we haven't touched on. They were Muslim.
Oh,
right?
they were, yes.
In a predominantly Hindu country.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they brought, did they convert? Did they actively convert people?
They did. They were established as the master race in India, and a lot of low caste Hindus were attracted to the Muslim religion because it, the caste system no longer applied. So that was a big recruiting element in the Mughal Empire.
So you wrote this book, Queen and Emperor, and you must have done an enormous amount of research. I really enjoyed reading it.
Did you really? I'm glad to hear that.
And I saw how much, not only the history, but like the daily life, the furniture, the things like that. Where did you do this research?
Well, I got a lot of books from Amazon.
Uh-huh.
And of course, I went through used bookstores and bookstores in general, and I found quite a bit of material actually. So, but it's a long time doing this book, and so a lot of research went into it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it was a labor of love.
Sure. So how did you know what details to put in and what details to put out? I know that's a hard thing for people who write historical books.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I never looked at it that way. Things that I thought people would be interested in, I just put down. And I mean, I dramatized issues that I thought would be of interest to people. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, pretty intuitive and personal, basically.
So, people have referred to this as the golden age of India, right? Do you agree with that?
I do. Oh, yeah. It was the most resplendent age. No question about that.
For the common people, too?
No, not at all. See, this whole edifice, the empire, rested on the shoulders of these exploited Hindu farmers, essentially. Mm. So that was not a good aspect of it.
Right, right. We're talking with Tony Raosto, if you're just joining us. This is New England Authors, and his book is called Queen and Emperor, and we're talking about the Mughal Empire. Now, Mughal and Mughal sound a lot alike.
Yeah, they're just different versions of the same word.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, I guess we're talking about Hollywood moguls.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't mean that.
and basically it was because of their lavish lifestyle that they were called Mughals.
So this they were descendants of the Mughals. They were right of Genghis Khan and
Oh yes, they were. Yeah, the Mughals were the descendant of Genghis Khan and Tamerlane.
yes.
The royalty was, of course. Yeah.
How did they become Muslim?
That's a good question because the hordes, the golden hordes, they believed in a nature religion. There was a sky god and other things. I'm not really very conversant with it, but somehow, I don't know how Islam penetrated to Central Asia. Actually, it's a good point. I should have looked that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they eventually they converted and became great believers and spread this to India.
Well, not exactly, because the great era of conversion had long passed, and these people were essentially nominal Muslims. I mean, for instance, they drank, which
Yeah.
is, of course, a no-no
Yeah.
in Islam, and they used opium, which is sort of frowned on.
Uh-huh.
And the Quran allows a man to have 4 wives,
Uh-huh.
but no more than that.
That's right. Yeah.
They were rather excessive in that department.
A liberal interpretation of a religion. Yeah. So maybe they kind of used religion, or
Yeah, essentially, it was their identity, just as Christians have a Christian identity, but very few Christians follow.
how far did their empire spread? Right. They were from Kabul in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, yeah, down to the Narmada River, which is the beginning of the Deccan. That's southern India.
Yeah.
And that was never completely conquered. There were always skirmishes, etc. But they never really extended their dominion much further south than the Narmada River, or the Vindhas Mountains, actually, which was a barrier.
Yeah.
But they tried. They tried for several generations, but with not much success.
So the southern India is a different language family than the northern India, right?
It's also different racially.
Different racially, yeah.
Yeah, and philosophically also. I mean, the people in the south are rather jolly, and the people in the north are kind of austere.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Mm. How often do you go there?
Well, last time I was there was about 9 years ago, so it's not too frequent these days.
I see.
I'm slowing down.
Yeah. Yeah, but I fell in love with the country too, and I really like it. So tell us a little bit more about Nur Jahan. She was his favorite wife, and she just kind of took over because he was addicted to opium and wine, right?
Yes. And so she expanded the empire, made it much more prosperous and liberal, as much as that sort of thing could be liberal. And she was a great builder. And she had a goddess-like presence. The Hindus worshipped her as a kind of Parvati, the consort of Shiva. And then the Muslims worshipped her as Khadijah, the prophet's wife. So it was, and then there was also a Christian element. So she was more or less considered a goddess, and she had a tremendous sense of charity. She distributed alms, and she made marriages for orphans. She did a lot of good social work. She fed people, and she brought actually India to its pinnacle, at least in the ancient times. Now, of course, India's surging upward and onward.
Oh yeah. But I was just thinking while you were speaking. I don't know any other woman. Muslim woman who achieved that much fame and power until recently.
Yeah. Well, there actually are.
There are.
I can't name them, but there are. But they never had the fame or the scope that she did. I mean, they were more or less limited to very small kingdoms and stuff. But there were women rulers.
And so she changed the face of the Mughal Empire. She changed the face of India. She changed history. Is that what she should do?
Well, I don't know how much change was involved. I mean, radical change. I mean, she certainly augmented the culture. But as far as radical change, for instance, she was a female, and you would think that it would be easygoing for females after that. That wasn't the case. She was more or less despised by Jahangir's nobles. And when Jahangir died, that was essentially the end of her career.
Oh, I see, I see. So she had contact with the West?
Well, only through Sir Thomas Roe, who was the first British ambassador, fully credentialed British ambassador. But that's pretty much and there were, of course, the Jesuits. I don't know how much contact she had with the Jesuits. She was a rather devoted Shia Muslim. She was Persian.
Oh, she
came from a Persian family, just like Benita, whatever her name is.
Benazir Bhutto.
Benazir Bhutto,
yeah. But she had one of her ships in the Red Sea that was taken over by Europeans, right?
No, actually.
I'm getting a lot of things wrong here.
Not that I know of. What I know of, Jahangir's mother was kind of a partner of her Nur Jahan's in sending pilgrims from the west coast of India to Mecca, and that was quite lucrative.
Yeah.
But the Portuguese captured that ship and set it afire.
Oh, yes, that's where I'm getting it from. Yes.
Yeah, and that was a changing point, because then they sort of dissolved connections with the Portuguese, who had been the dominant Europeans in India, and slowly the British overtook them and filled in the spaces that were vacated by the Portuguese.
Yeah. So did they have contact with China?
You know, that's interesting. Not an awful lot, but there were Chinese artifacts that were commonly possessed by the royalty. Beautiful vases and things, and embroideries and things like that.
Yeah.
But as far as diplomatic connections and trading connections, I don't think there were an awful lot.
So you obviously fell so much in love with this story that you wanted to spend so much time researching and writing this book. What was the process like? Was it hard?
Well, it was time consuming, and I hadn't expected that. What I thought was that, boy, this is going to be very easy because it's all laid out for me. I don't have to construct a plot. I can just start writing.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't the case. I had to learn about Shia Islam, Sunni Islam, Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, but it was all fun. It was just great stuff to do.
So you're a font of information about this now, just like me. I get to learn all these
somewhat
things.
A very amateur fount, a very very small fount, nothing really.
So tell us, opium plays a big part in your book here. Tell us, what's the history of opium? Do you know that? And how did it get to India?
Well, I think it grows there, and it grows in Afghanistan, which was more or less part of India, at least administratively, and it grows there. India has always been a source for opium, so it was not a big transition to begin opium smoking.
But is it ancient? I mean, how?
I would imagine so. You know, opium is the oldest drug. That's the drug we humans used in the very beginning. That was the first.
I see. And were many people besides the emperor addicted?
It wasn't a big issue, so that it was a big issue with him because he was the ruler. Other people seemed to just function without any real limitation because of opium.
Yeah.
It didn't do him an awful lot of good, though.
Yeah. So if you're just joining us, this is New England Authors, and we're talking with Tony Raosto. His book is Queen and Emperor, and it's about the Mughal Empire. It's about India. It's about the 15, 16, 1700s. Well, it's actually about 1600s, right? Yeah, you go into there. So tell us about Khusro, the son.
Khusro, yeah.
Khusro, the son.
That's right. He was his firstborn, and he was slightly mad. He was a very charismatic personality, and a very good-looking guy. So he was favored for a while by the nobility because of Jahangir's addictions. But it didn't quite work out. He rebelled against his father, and the punishment was his being blinded. So, which was a kind of standard punishment in the Islamic, not the Islamic world, but in the Mughal world. Yeah.
So he had a bad fate, his son.
Yes, he was eventually assassinated when the empire, when the kingship was up for grabs. He was since he was the first in line, he was assassinated. Many people think it was Jahangir, who was third in line, that did it. His other brother, the second in line, was Pervez, and he was an alcoholic, and he died from alcoholism. So in eliminating Khusro, became the eligible heir. So that was a very big issue in the Mughal Empire.
Could I bring this to current times now? We have a surge of Hindu nationalism in India right now. A lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric and actions. Well, how do the Indians today, the Hindus, see the Mughal Empire, the Muslim Empire, which was their golden age?
I think the majority of Indians are look upon it very favorably. But what happened? What the source of this current discontent is that one of the policies of the Mughal Empire was to demolish Hindu temples, and then with the materials thus liberated to build mosques. And that's what happened at Ayodhya. And Modi, who was the governor of Gujarat at the time, he encouraged the demolition of this particular mosque and the rebuilding of a Hindu temple on its site. So, this is 500 years old, but it's still active, and it's still. But of course, politically, these racial divisions or these religious divisions are exploited. The British exploited that, a divided population, and these divisions are politically advantageous.
Yeah. Modi, by the way, is the Prime Minister of India right now,
Right,
and
yes.
so and he's a nationalist, right-wing kind of person. The Muslims today, they're very numerous in India. It's one of the most Muslim countries
in the world,
just because.
I think there's something like 150 or 180 million Muslims, so it's a sizable population. But Muslims in India feel very much like second-class citizens. So that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. And so in 1948, there was this great division, and there was this transfer of peoples. Most of the Muslims went to, terrible thing that happened, most of the Muslims went to Pakistan or
Right.
Bangladesh.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And what's your work doing on now? Are you going to do a sequel? Are you gonna
Well, I
write?
had thought about it, but actually I'm not. I'm going to be writing about Brooklyn, where I'm from. So a radical departure.
Oh, really? Modern Brooklyn or the historical?
Well, I'm gonna introduce certain historical elements.
Uh-huh. Is it true that Brooklyn stands for broken land or something?
That's what we were taught in civics class in Brooklyn. Yes, but it's a very localized. I find out recently that it's very localized. In other words, it was referring to the land around a Dutch village called Brookline, and that's what it meant. And also Brookline, by the way.
Brookline here and
yeah, they're the
our
same. They're
studio,
derived
yeah.
from the same Dutch word.
Yeah. Well, it's so good to have you here talking about the Mughal Empire. Tony Raosto, you're a credit to New England for bringing this to us, and I really enjoyed reading your book. This is New England Authors. We're supported by the Curiosity Foundation. We record in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and broadcast on stations throughout the area. Remember, watch locally. Thank you.